Hey, Peaceniks. Today's guest, Chelsea and Suzanne of the Stiicky Eddie Podcast. That's Sticky with 2 I's. Stiicky Eddie Podcast. We had a great conversation about alcohol use disorder, about addiction, about all the problems in society that are around what I talk about in this podcast and other things with education and what are some of the ways we could fix these problems. It was great having them on as a guest. We started with the conversation on their podcast, so I urge you to listen to the one I was on their podcast and check out their podcast, the Stiicky Eddie Podcast. And let's go ahead and just dive on in.
America's public enemy number one in the United States is drug abuse.
Drugs are menacing our society.
What are your thoughts on the drug problem?
I had a great time doing drugs.
So tonight, from our family to yours, from our home to yours, thank you for joining us.
This is the Peace on Drugs.
All right, so Chelsea, Suzanne, thank you for joining me on the Peace on Drugs podcast.
Thanks for having us.
Of course. Yeah, and you guys host the Stiicky Eddie podcast that I was just a guest on your show.
Yeah.
So
that was exciting. We were so lucky to have you. Thanks again.
Thank you. I want to start by just explaining to my guests what your podcast is about and what got you started on it.
So I founded the podcast after losing my dad in December 2020. This is Chelsea speaking, by the way. My dad passed away from alcohol use disorder, unfortunately, and I knew nothing about addiction. So in the wake of losing him, I was just kind of floundering and feeling really bad and wanting to know more about the beast that is addiction and having a hard time in grief, etc. And I wanted to create a platform to learn more and to help others do the same. And about a year into the podcast, I decided that it would be really great to have a co-host. So I reached out to my dear friend Suzanne, who had been a guest on the show a couple of times, and everybody loved her. And Suzanne joined me quite recently, but it's been an amazing journey so far.
That's great. That's great. I've thought about doing the same thing, having somebody who's been a guest come be on my podcast, but it's hard to find somebody who really wants to spend the time to do it. So you're lucky there.
Yeah, no, Suzanne's amazing. Suzanne, I'll let you explain your journey and what brought you to this.
Oh God, how long is this podcast now? Well, you were kind enough to reach out to me and ask me to be a guest on your podcast when you were just doing it yourself, which I thought was amazing. My journey, I am a recovering alcoholic, so I have a lot of experience with that. I'm also an adult child of alcoholics, so pretty much everybody in my family were alcoholics. I also went to school to become a drug and alcohol counselor, so I do have that certification. What really propelled my push to get out there and really help people more was I lost my husband, Bobby, September 8th of 2020. And the previous year, Christmas Eve, I lost my dad. And then March of 2021, I lost my mom. So it's been a really crazy whirlwind in between COVID. I do a lot of work with grieving widows, particularly sober, because the night my husband passed, I had just gotten 10 years, 2 months. And that was the first time in all that years of sobriety that I ever wanted to pick up a drink, because I just wanted to disappear. But I knew if I went down that rabbit hole, I was never coming back. And I reached out to sober widow groups, grief groups, none around. So I started one. And we actually still meet. It gets few and far between our meetings now, only because we're like the summer is busy and all that, but I'm hoping to get back into it. But I do grief facilitation with widows in Long Island area. But I pretty much do a lot of things between that. And of course, try and help people if they need help with alcoholism or, substance abuse. So a lot.
Yeah. What's the, there must be a pretty, I don't know how high the percentage is of people that relapse when they suffer a trauma like the loss of a loved one, because the original addiction probably resulted from trauma. So when they have a trauma again, it makes it really hard for them to abstain.
100%. And what happened with me is every support group that I went into for widowhood, like the one thing I knew from the program and I went to, a 12-step program, is that I knew I couldn't do this grief journey alone. I needed support. But all the widow groups and all the support groups that I looked for online, in person, everybody was like, well, I'm just going to have a glass of wine. It was just not the mindset that I needed. And we all know that alcohol is a depressant, so it's probably the worst thing in the world to try and do. But that's one of the things that propelled me to become a drug and alcohol counselor was I wanted to work with adolescents. And my professor once said to me, well, that's going to be the hardest age group to work with. But I wanted to get the kids before that unfortunately might have suffered trauma, because like you said, trauma brings up a lot and you want to escape that trauma because you don't want to feel it's painful. So I wanted to work with adolescents because if they had so many people, I believe, in my eyes, alcoholism is a disease. I know that you can get into a whole debate, whether it's hereditary, genetic, environmental, but I think that what happens when we suffer a trauma is some people can go and have a drink or two and they're fine. Other people don't. So I wanted to get to people that they didn't have the predisposition to become an alcoholic or an addict and really give them the tools, the mental health tools, the self-care tools before that came into play. So for me, I knew because of my years of being an ACOA, years of being in the program, years of research, therapy, you name it, I did it. I knew that I could not do this alone. Could not do it alone.
Yeah. Definitely helps when you have people you can relate to that have been through the same things or similar things, and then you feel like you're not alone, and that really helps people grow. And I do a podcast about drugs, and the thing is I always try to tell people that doesn't mean that I'm saying everybody should be out there doing drugs. I think we need to have a world where people can do them safer if they're going to choose to use them. But yes, if people are using drugs to escape something, and they can find a way to heal instead of escape.
Yeah.
And that's a much better, they're gonna have a much happier life. And so I'm happy that you're doing that, helping people.
And unfortunately, there are people that can use substances like alcohol and drugs and be 100% okay. But
Right.
There are a vast majority of people that can't, and it becomes an addiction. And then, you have your lives ruined, or, your family. It's just, there needs to be balance, and there needs to be support for your journey, whatever you're going through.
To answer your question earlier, Aaron, because I have this saved in my notes, but the statistic is between 40 and 60% of people who have struggled with addiction will relapse after experiencing a fresh, quote unquote, trauma.
Yeah, see, it's really high.
It's high. It's super high.
Because unfortunately, and this goes back to grief, whether it's it happened to be my husband. And I've talked to Chelsea with this. I'm not diminishing my mother or my father's death, but that's the natural order of life. Unfortunately, we're going to lose our grandparents. We're going to lose our dads, our moms, and all that other stuff. But to have, my husband was 50. In fact, the day before he died, it was his birthday. So we didn't expect to wake up the next morning and be planning a funeral. And I joke because my dark humor is coming out lately. But it's grief, the way we treat it. And this is what I learned when I was going through this journey in the Western civilization is so much different from everywhere else. Any other kind of religion, any other kind of, you go overseas, death is not treated where, okay, you have 3 days. And if it's a distant relative, you only get 1 day, and you're expected to go back to normal. I was at my wake for my husband. My employers came because this was in the middle of COVID and said, oh, by the way, you can come back to work on Monday. I'm like, yeah, no, not. My world just crashed, Yeah. So for me, it was just, there was absolutely no support, and grief. I feel like along with addiction and mental health there's a stigma. You are meant to feel bad about grieving your person, whether it was your mom, your dad, your grandma, your grandpa, your husband, your wife, your child, so I wanted to get out there that grief is okay and it's normal. And you're today I was coming home from work and tears just strolled down my eyes because I listened to a song, and the day was a good day, but it comes out of nowhere. And people are like, oh, you're not done with this yet. You're not over it. We don't want to put an update, so there definitely needs to be a lot more out there.
Yeah, I think
And
it's just our world's become so fast paced with consumerism and people working 50 hours a week. We don't allow women who, after giving birth to children, we don't give them paid time off. We definitely
nope.
are considering it for the fathers. I mean, there's talks about it, but we're way behind other countries in this. And then, like you said, for grief, if you lose someone, well, when can you come back? Because we need you. It's like, can you be human at some point and just understand that people need time off of work for various reasons? I mean, calling in sick with COVID was a big issue. We actually had COVID and tried to call in, and places would be like, well, we need you to play. Can you just like not sing and wear a mask? It's like, no, I'm also sick. Do you understand? It's not just, I don't want to spread it, which is part of it, but I'm also very sick, and people don't want to hear it. They want things to keep on moving.
Yeah.
I think that's true also with addiction and mental health. Years ago, if you had an addiction problem, you could stay an inpatient on a rehab or a detox facility for months, years at a time. Now it's like you're out in all right, 6 days. Maybe if you push it, you can get 30 days. But you can't. And mental health, if you can even find a facility to take you, they're pushing you in and pushing you out as fast as you can. And it's not enough time to get to the juice of it, to get to the bottom, to the deep inner soul. Like, I'm only on my real, I say, healing journey for 2 years now. And I got a lot more to go. And I've been doing the work for years, you know?
Yeah, it takes time. It really does. And I've been lucky that I've been able to kind of find the route myself without rehab. But I have a friend that went, but he got lucky. He had a sister that went to the rehab facility, so we got a huge discount. It was still $8,000. He had the money. See, this is something a lot of people don't have. They're an alcoholic. A lot of people wouldn't have $8,000 laying around.
No.
And also wouldn't have a discount. And it was $25,000 if he didn't have that discount. So he didn't have that kind of money. He wouldn't have been able to go, but he did go, and he did get sober. Then a year later, he relapsed. He started getting bad with his alcohol again. He got to go back to rehab, and now he's been sober for over a year. And he's doing really well. Awesome. But he uses cannabis, though. That works for him. A lot of places would say if you use that, it's going to lead back to pot. But for him, he needed something, and cannabis works for him. And he's a bartender too, so it's hard to be a bartender and be around alcohol. But he makes so much money bartending, and he has no degrees, so it's not like he can go, oh, I'll just go get a job at construction. I did that before, where I quit playing in bars and music, and I did construction. And when you get that paycheck for all the work you did, it's like, it's just so hard to work in the real world without a degree.
Well, that's the struggle I think that my dad in particular always had, because, the podcast is named the Stiicky Eddie Podcast to represent my dad's stage name. He was a drummer, and his stage name was Sticky, with 2 eyes to represent the sticks. But that was, thanks. That was the biggest thing for him. He's a drummer. He's in clubs all of the time. He's, has to be charismatic, and he has to be able to schmooze with people and deal with people. And unfortunately, it just starts to go hand in hand. And, my dad was 69 when he passed away. So he was a drummer from, I guess, like 9 years old. And so all your life you're spending in this environment, and whether you like it or not, my dad had a lot of other underlying, I think, mental health issues that weren't addressed, or maybe not even mental health issues, but just facets of his personality that weren't supported accurate or adequately because of his generation. And so it was just this social lubricant that he needed all of the time, which was so funny to me, because when he was sober, his personality was he was literally the best person on the planet, So I just never understood why people need to lean so heavily on it. But what you were just saying really kind of piqued my ears, because I'm loving what I'm seeing as far as harm reduction lately. And I appreciate the fact that your friend realizes alcohol is going to be his downfall, but he might not necessarily be prepared to lead a productive life without anything. He might just not be physically able to. Mm-hmm. And I think more people need to start accepting that's okay for some people. And if you need that, if he needs weed instead of alcohol, and that's what's going to save his life eventually, then we need to start finding ways to be okay with that and supportive of that.
100%. And there's a weird thing where we have in this country where the idea of getting high on something for some people is just so insane. Like why wouldn't you want to be sober? And for some people, getting high isn't about losing reality. It's about finding somebody. Like for me, I'm a musician. I love smoking a little bit. Now I'm not one of the people that gets so high. Like, there's a very different level between someone who sits and smokes a whole joint back to back versus me, where I take 2 hits and I'm pretty much good for the day, but it gets my day going. And, I look at someone like my buddy Will, who was on my podcast and talked about this stuff. Alcohol was so addicting that he would wake up. I went to stay at his house. He would wake up and pour a big glass of vodka and Gatorade and chug it to go back to sleep because he was waking up shaking. And then when he quit cold turkey, he locked himself in a hotel room and almost died. He got so bad. And then luckily they called the cops on him because it was time to check out, and he started seizing in the hospital. Christ. So for someone like him, alcohol is extremely dangerous for him to do. And when he went back, it was just a beer here or there. That's how it starts. And then a beer here or there led to a shot here or there. All of a sudden, he's back to drinking the vodka and Gatorades in the morning. So for some people, alcohol is extremely dangerous. Actually, I should say this. I just listened to the Huberman Lab podcast about alcohol. Alcohol is actually extremely dangerous for everyone. There's no safe amount of alcohol to drink. If you enjoy it, you have to understand that it's got horrible negative health effects. Causes cancer just as bad as cigarettes. They don't tell you that. Everybody knows cigarettes cause cancer. How many people know that alcohol causes cancer just as badly? And alcohol has all kinds of other issues that it causes. So if you drink, you need to know this is not a safe thing you're doing. But if you enjoy it and it gets you through your day and you convince yourself of that, as I do convince myself that, hey, me and my wife enjoy drinks at the end of the day. But I am trying to cut back tremendously because it is a very dangerous drug.
Good for you.
I listened to part of that podcast because they were explaining how not even just alcoholics, but people that have like a weekend drink, and go out drinking, binging or whatever, the effects. Now, I know this anyway, but I'm glad that it's getting out there more and more, because alcohol, forget about cancer, it destroys your whole entire body. Like you could have a heroin junkie that gets clean. Inside is okay. Alcoholics get, sober, awesome, great. They stop the damage they're doing to their body, but the damage that's been done for the years of drinking is there. Your pancreas, your kidneys, your liver, your heart, your blood, everything. It just really is not a good substance to put in you. And we did a whole podcast on it about, how they glorify the alcohol industry, how they push it, and how they make it seem like it's like, it even gets me sometimes, because I've gone into liquor stores to buy stuff and I'm like, damn, when I was drinking, they didn't have all this good shit out. Now I want to be able to drink and I can't, But I think that the main thing with any kind of addictions is it has to be multifaceted. Every area has to be covered, not just the alcoholism, but is mental health and alcoholism go so together. There's so much comorbidity in that they don't treat the mental illness along with the alcoholism, and then that's what leads to relapses. It's like plus the fact that an alcoholic's mind is crazy, because you like my dad relapsed 27 years after being sober, because your mind goes, well, maybe I'm good. Alcoholic problems, I could do it. So I'm gonna have a beer, and one beer leads into two, and then we all know that alcoholism is progressive. So before you know it, by the end of the week, he's down in his SoCo and handles of that, and it's we're allowed to curse, right?
Oh yeah.
Fuck yeah.
Okay, it's the ultimate mind fuck. It's just like when you have a mental health patient that's a bipolar person and they get treated for the medication. And the number one reason for people with bipolar that have issues is because once they start to feel good, they said, I don't need this fucking medicine no more, so I'm going to stop taking it. So it's an endless cycle. So there has to be a multifaceted approach to treating people along with prevention. And I believe prevention really is starting now with what the effects of alcohol is doing internally. And not only that, but I think it's the same podcast that human lab or whatever.
Yeah.
The mind, what it does to your your neurons, your neurotransmitters, everything inside of it. Yeah, and they don't glorify that because
I would say he said that some of that neurodegeneration will actually heal itself depending on how bad of an alcoholic you've been. Some of it won't, but if you quit drinking for like 2 or 3 months, some of that'll start fixing itself. And And it's really, that's one of the scariest things for me in alcohol is the idea that it could lead to dementia faster and other kinds of things. And
Yeah.
I just think that, and also the most effects that are going to happen immediately that any alcoholic or somebody that even just went out drinking for a night will know is your base level of anxiety is higher than somebody who doesn't drink when you're not drinking. Yeah. And he said that somebody that drinks 1 to 2 drinks on a weekend, just 1 or 2 drinks, will have a higher base level throughout the rest of the week than somebody who didn't have any drinks. And when he said 1 or 2, and he even said, I know that 2 might sound like a lot. And I'm like, oh shit, like 2 sounds like I haven't even started my night yet.
Night yet. I know.
Yeah. It's so.
And I know so many people that the one thing that gets them is the anxiety. They have a term for it, hangxiety, instead of hangover. It's not the feeling of complete death the next day because you drank yourself. It's perpetuating and waiting for the anxiety to take effect. And when he said that, I was like, oh my God, like, yes. And that's what's so great about getting it out there. Because I remember when I was in school, we had to do a lot of case studies and a lot of things. And alcohol is really the number one killer because most people do not go into the hospital and say, well, yeah, I had, I had a handle of Tito's every night for the last 20 years. That's why everything looks inside. Because again, it's a stigma, oh, you're an alcoholic, you're a junkie. People don't want to go in and say, well, I drink. Because they get the looks. Oh, okay, look, you're this or that. So it's the prevention to be able to go in and be honest with your doctors and not feel like there's just big stigma against it, Yeah.
I love that. When I just started doing this, when I go to the doctor and it says, do you use any illegal drugs? I just start listing the stuff I do. And most of it's just, natural stuff like mushrooms. But I put it on there because it blows them away because no one does that. Why would you don't need to tell them that, but I do because I want to destigmatize it. Yeah, I use these drugs. I drink sometimes, I tell them exactly how much I drink. Why lie to your doctor? I mean, this just doesn't,
but
you have to.
Sorry, Chelsea. It's so common. And if they're treating you for a condition, they need to know what they're giving you is not going to interact with what you're taking. So it's like, it's so paramount.
That's the biggest obstacle that I faced with my dad. And that is one thing that I work really hard on this. And Suzanne knows, I'm constantly would've, could've, shoulding myself to death because there are so many things I would love to do differently by way of supporting him better. Perhaps making him feel much less judged and all of that. He had a really severe problem, and especially in the last couple of years of his life, I saw a lot of permanent neurodegeneration, particularly in his handwriting. His hands had like a permanent shake to them. And it's something that he always prided himself on, being able to do like craft wording and stuff like that. And, he definitely started changing. And in the last year of his life, he had a very small stroke. And I was very afraid that he was never going to be able to speak again. And his doctors, we had to rush him to the ER. He was having very severe hallucinations. And the doctor said to him, like, Mr. Cruci, if you take another drink, within the rest of your life, if you continue to drink, your pancreas is going to explode. You are a ticking time bomb, quite literally. And, they had to almost try to scare him straight. And I could see, you can always see there's a part of the person who's looking out at you and they desperately they don't want this. Nobody wants to be trapped in the horror that is a severe addiction. They don't want to be in pain. That's just what it is. They just don't want to be in pain. And that is one thing that I am desperately trying to fight for is better support for people who are in pain and cannot articulate themselves in any other way. They just know that they need to find something to numb themselves from it.
Yeah, it's really sad. And I'm sorry you had to go through that. I have friends too that are a friend that's been in the hospital with liver, whatever they call it, cirrhosis.
Sorry.
And
yeah.
it's something that it wasn't necessarily cirrhosis. It was something with his liver, but it had to do with drinking, but also had to do with, I believe, hepatitis from when he was using heroin. So because that also can come back and mess your liver up.
Yes, that's a yeah.
But he was basically told he can't drink anymore, and then he started drinking again. Ended up in the hospital a second time, and then a third time he was in a coma and was in there for a month, and now he's back out, and I hear he's drinking again, and it's like That's just how dangerous this drug is. This is a drug that you're not like, we know it'll kill you over time, but when you know that you have weeks to live if you keep doing it and you keep doing it, like, it's just crazy when I think about other drugs that we've outlawed, people that were taken to jail for long periods of time for possessing cannabis. When we have alcohol promoted, advertised everywhere, you go to your grocery store, there's huge signs with Budweiser and the flags and the football teams. This is the drug to do. It's like, this is the worst drug that you could pick for your recreational drug. And it's the only one that actually is pretty heavy intoxicant that's legal. And
because there's money to be made there.
And there's money to be made in cannabis. Now that people are realizing that, they're starting to legalize it in different states, different ways. I think, though, that the idea that you can't grow it yourself if you have a medical card, like here, like, that's ridiculous. But again, they want to make money on it. That's the only reason they legalize it.
It's 100%. It comes down to the money, and it comes down to what the government, they're going to get from it.
Yeah.
And I know somebody very, very close to me that was literally told your liver is shot. You have cirrhosis, and the addiction was just so bad, and he died from liver cancer. It's a shame.
When you go to the gas station and you see that sticker on the pump that says contains 10% ethanol, you really I was staring so hard at this thing the other day while I was pumping my gas, because I'm like, I literally might as well, if I'm drinking, turn this nozzle around and just pour this down my throat.
Yeah,
essentially, no, obviously, but it's no. I'm not at that level yet. I mean, I have my issues, but I'm thinking to myself, like, this is what people are pouring down their throats essentially when they go to the liquor store. What you're drinking is straight poison. It has ethanol in it. Alcohol
is ethanol, and ethanol.
Right.
And see, ethanol is interesting. I was talking to Dr. Junkie about it, about the, I think he was explaining how human beings are one of the few animals that can even process alcohol. For most animals, it's just straight lethal. But because I think we were eating a lot of fermented fruits that were going bad because we were kind of scavengers, we actually genetically developed the ability to drink alcohol. And not everybody can. Some people don't have that ability, and alcohol is extremely toxic to them. And those people are almost lucky they can't drink. So
no, they definitely are.
but yeah, so the alcohol is extremely toxic. It's just we're able to maintain it for a pretty good amount of time and drink it for a pretty good amount of time before it'll start really causing damage. But it inevitably will, no matter who you are. And I really wish, like, for one, that we would wake up to this idea that alcohol, and also, again, prohibition is my whole podcast is about the war on drugs. Prohibition doesn't work. I don't think we should outlaw alcohol, but I think we should treat it a lot differently. We shouldn't treat it as marketed commercials. You know how cigarettes we did? We took all the ads out of cigarettes.
Truth.
We put warning labels on it. Truth ads. We what else? No TV ads allowed. You don't see cigarette signs at football games, because we try to take the sexiness out of it and take the marketing out of it. And a lot less people smoke today. And we should do that with alcohol. No more advertising. No more making it look cool. No more sexy commercials of people on the beach with their bottles of Coronas and having all the good fun. Maybe have the commercial, someone crashing a car off a bridge or something. Like, this is alcohol, yay! And because this stuff really happens with people in alcohol, but that's the reality of alcohol. If you pass a bar at 11 in the morning, you see the same people sitting there at that bar because that's how they start their day, and that's the sadness of alcoholism. It's not the people. Yeah, there are people partying on the beach having a great time. That's also part of it, but we're not seeing the whole picture through advertisement.
No, and they took away, like, years ago when I went to school, we had the DARE program, which at least taught about drug and alcohol.
Yeah, but it wasn't effective.
And the mad people came around, and they turned, at least they showed what drunk driving could do and the accidents and all that other stuff and everything like that. But I believe that should be a major component in schools, starting very, very young, about alcohol and drugs and what it can be in true life, and bring recovering people in, bring, nurses in, bring people in and see this is what doctors, this is what happens, and teach responsibility. Because when we were talking about it on our podcast, when they show a commercial of gambling, especially now with the sports and football starting, it's always like, if you have a gambling problem, please call. Every single commercial on alcohol, there is nothing that says, no. If you have, you feel you have a problem. Like you said, everything is glorified to the tense, and it's just like, when do you draw the line? Like, where do you draw the line and say, all right, this has got to stop? But again, it's money for the taxation on it. It's got to be a big money maker for the medical field and the insurance companies, because they're seeing so many patients from that and everything like that. So it's like, everywhere else you go, again, if you go across the pond, you go into, they are taught how to drink responsibly, how to prevent, instances of alcoholism and all this stuff. I don't think that the rates, I'm going to have to do that tonight. I'm going to research that. Be a good topic. The rates of alcoholism elsewhere other than here.
I would imagine this might just be I've been brainwashed, but I think in Ireland it would be pretty high.
Yeah, it is.
But I've heard other countries. My buddy went to Amsterdam when he was young, and they just got super, super stoned as soon as they got there. They were so high they could hardly walk, and everybody immediately was like, "Americans are here." They're overindulging Americans.
100%, because you ask anybody from here where they want to go. They want to go that are pot smokers. Amsterdam, Germany. I'm sure Germany doesn't have a problem with it, and they're their beers and stuff.
What Aaron just said is a really, really, really good point, and I just want to expand on it for 2 seconds. We have to, like Suzanne said, start educating kids at a much younger level. But what you just said was golden, because if we approach things in a way less punitive manner, and if we start just understanding, like, no one wants their kids to drink or do drugs, obviously. Unfortunately, it is something that is most likely going to happen. But if you take the judgment out of it, like I always tell my son, whatever you do, even if it's something bad, just tell me. I can never get mad at you for telling me the truth. I need to know the full story so that I can support you the best. And whatever happens from there happens, but just know that I will always have your back, and you never have to fib, you never have to lie. And I think if we take that same approach when we talk to the youth about drugs and alcohol, and just say, we're taking the judgment, we're taking the punishment out of it, but you need to know, if you try this, this is what could happen.
Mm-hmm.
And you really want, and also too, I don't think it's a bad idea to start introducing Narcan training and other preventative measures in school as early as, 4th or 5th grade, before they enter middle school, because especially with the introduction of fentanyl in everything except for freaking goldfish crackers these days, we really need to start empowering these kids at a younger age so that there's less of a desire to overindulge. Because
definitely
the day that heroin is legal doesn't mean that I'm going to go sprinkle it on my Wheaties.
No, and also if heroin was legal, we wouldn't need Narcan as badly as we do, because people could go to a doctor and get a dose that they would know what they were getting, and it wouldn't kill them. It wouldn't be bad to have it on hand because somebody might overdose, but it would be so much less. Now we have fentanyl. Fentanyl wouldn't be the thing on the streets if it wasn't for prohibition. And that's the main reason we need Narcan so badly. And a lot of people don't even understand Narcan. I heard somebody saying, yeah, we should have Narcan, but you don't want to just do this. You don't want people doing this stuff. I'm like, do you even understand what Narcan is? It doesn't get you high at all. Nobody's going to abuse a drug that doesn't have any effect other than reversing the effects of an opioid. But people just, they hear Narcan, they think narcotic. There's just so much misinformation, but that goes to what we're talking about, that we need to have honest conversations with our children. Yes, like the DARE program was a dishonest conversation that once we realized I smoked pot and was like, well, that wasn't so bad. What else were they lying about? But like South Park had a great episode about it where their parents hire themselves from the future to come and be like, oh, drugs really messed me up. And the kids realize they're lying. Like, if you just would be honest, why don't you just talk to us honestly? Like, what? And that's really what it is. And if you look at Portugal, what they're doing with their children, they've decriminalized, and they have honest, and they ask the kids, are you going to do drugs? And if the kids say yes, they go, okay, here's some stuff, you might want to know. And why do you want to do it? And a lot of kids are like, no, I'm good. They've taken the sexiness and the oh, I'm a badass if I'm doing drugs. And I felt like that when I was in high school. Like, yeah, I'm going to smoke pot. I'm going to come in smelling like pot, all eyes glazed. Oh, that's so cool. It's illegal. I'm breaking the law. Take all that out of it. Like, no, you're just a guy that got high before school and you're going to fail your test now.
Yeah. Good luck in Spanish class.
I failed all those classes.
How do you counter that with that? There are, like we've discussed in the beginning of the conversation, is there are people that can do that and be okay with it, but then you do have people that will become addicted to it. And then how do you structure a program to foster not having that happen?
We've spent $1 trillion arresting people and building prisons. If we would have spent all that money on mental health facilities and teachers and places where people could go who have problems, we would have a lot less people with these problems. I mean, like you said, if you go to a rehab facility, first, if you can afford it and get accepted, second, you're in and you're out. If we had a proper mental institution, also just not really, it's not really changing the subject, but we have people that with extreme mental conditions like bipolar, schizophrenia, they're hearing voices. Heroin seems to make them feel better. They like the heroin better than they like their antipsychotic medicine. So you have homeless schizophrenics with nowhere to go. These people are hearing voices. They need a proper home that can treat them properly. They don't need to be in the streets. Yeah. Their families have abandoned them because they don't have the money or time or patience, a lot of them, to handle somebody with this kind of mental affliction. So why are we not helping them? Why are we allowing them to live in cities made of tents? This is insanity. And now there's the drugs that they're using that they actually make them feel better, that they're not allowed to use, contain fentanyl, and now they're dying. Why, like I say, what are the history books going to say about the way we're running our country right now? They're going to look at all these things and go, how in the hell could they do that? And then they're probably going to be doing something else nefarious that they're not seeing for themselves, because that's human nature. That's just,
It's like a process of elimination. These people are treated as other because they do not follow social conformity. They don't look a certain way. They don't adhere, to the boundaries of our quote unquote norms. And so they are looked down upon. We look past them. We don't actually see them. I live in an area of New York that hosts a lot of people that are a part of the Search for Change program, which is supposed to help people with, pre-existing mental health conditions or, recovering from an addiction. It's supposed to help facilitate education for them and, just help them kind of feel better, which can in turn help you turn toward a more positive path. Maybe you return to education and maybe you do pursue something that you wanted to do in life. But the whole purpose of situations like that is to make people feel like they're wanted again, feel like they are a part of society again. And I think that's what's so important. I've witnessed plenty of homeless people who, to be honest, looked a little scary and a little grungy and, obviously just not well kept. But I've heard conversations between police officers and these homeless people where this person is, extremely articulate, definitely with it, not like scum on the bottom of anybody's shoe. These are people that, I like to think we're all one mistake away from being in this situation. We have to remember that, anybody who is going down that path, you could be one or two steps away from finding yourself there. And how would you want to be treated?
Oh, I know. And now because of the housing market, people in Florida are living in their cars with families. These are people who have jobs, but can't find a place to live.
They're doing it in New York too.
Yeah. It's ridiculous. And I mean, the idea that people, we have this pick yourself up by your bootstraps. You got yourself there. And like you said, you have kids that they want to be a part of a community. Their families have abandoned them, showing them nothing but tough love, which isn't love at all. And they've abandoned them. And then kids in the streets doing drugs, they find a family within themselves. So those homeless communities become what they need because they're not getting it anywhere else. So of course it's going to be hard to get better, because getting better means leaving that family to a place that they don't feel loved to try to get help from someone who doesn't love them. So it's not an easy route. And when you said that the idea is that we have people with component of mental health problem or trauma and then addiction. So you can't treat the addiction and then put them back out on the streets and expect them not to relapse, because Johan Hari put it really well in his book. He said it's like a building's on fire. The smoke is the drug use. The fire is the problem causing the smoke, and you're just blowing out the smoke. Really, you're just fanning the flames. The flames are going to keep burning. The smoke's going to keep coming back. You have to put that fire out. And that's what we have to do, is treat the mental illness, treat whatever the cause was that led to the addiction.
Yeah, absolutely. And they don't do that, because I don't even think schools nowadays even have any kind of social worker counselors in them anymore. They strip them out of that. Up here in New York, we had tons of mental health communities, mental health hospitals, and New York decided to close them, and they just kicked everybody out on the street. So, it's just a cycle of not treating the cause of whether it even leads into addiction. I'm just talking about straight mental health, because there's many people that have mental health illness that don't become addicted. Mm-hmm. But why isn't mental health being treated? Why isn't there, because let me tell you something. The counselor at my elementary school was the first person I ever told that I was abused. That started the cycle of getting the help that I needed and allowing myself eventually to tell the people that I was abused. Had that counselor not been there, the social worker or whatever, who knows where I would be today, But they're not in the schools anymore, So forget about the addiction aspect of it, why aren't there, you know, how many children go to school that are abused, that are neglected, that are going to school hungry? Why aren't there counselors in there to help those kids with their mental health illnesses? Chelsea, we lost Chelsea.
We lost her.
Yeah, I'm sure she'll pop right back
Yeah,
in. Like, I don't understand why they're not in there. You know?
I know. Well, we really massively defunded public schools, and it's really sad. And I don't know how you feel on it. This is very controversial. Biden's $350 billion or whatever $300 billion bailout for college loan debt. And then I think there should be socialized college at some point, but we need to fix K through 12 before we worry about college educated people. K through 12, a lot of poor people, they're not going to go to college because they didn't have the proper K through 12. So you're bailing out the people who had the right schools to get them to college. And I don't like that.
I 100% agree. I 100% agree. The funds should be started in kindergarten. They could talk about all these other things in the world in school nowadays, but they're not talking about the important things, and unfortunately children don't learn from consequences. So they need the education. That's when my professor said adolescence is the hardest, because they have nothing to lose. They don't have a family. They don't have a job. They don't have cars. They don't have anything. So they're just, with their whole attitude is, fuck it, I'm going to do it anyway, because I don't have a consequence. You get somebody who's an alcoholic or an addict and loses his family, his job. That might be the push for him to be like, all right, this is my why. I'm getting clean now, But if they had the education starting in kindergarten, and again, not just for alcoholism or addiction, but for mental health, it would save so much. And like you said, they're not going to go to college. So why are they doing it then? That's the important K through 12. But they really just abandon it. And they're like,
and there's also some of the real poor communities and the inner city communities have been so badly broken up. And really, a lot of it is the war on drugs that broke it up. But the kids, they're living in neighborhoods that are high crime. There's lots of drugs there. There's going to be violence, and when they go home, there might not be food in the cupboards. And so where they count on that food is in going to school, and they might get one meal a day. And I think if we had money for after school programs where they could have a safe place to go after school, where they also fed another meal, that would be instrumental. And because this is when their brains are developing, their social abilities are developing, and they're not developing in the correct way in those circumstances, and it creates a very unfair life that they have. And then when they end up in a world of crime, we say, well, that's your fault. You got yourself there, jail. Now criminal record. Now you can't get a job. We've just created a system of perpetual fucking them over, and so we need to fix that. We need to put money there. That's what I want to see money go. I don't for college loan debt. That's, if we had the money, that's great. But I think until we fix K through 12, let's stop worrying about free college. Ultimately, that should be our goal. Ultimately, we should have a system that has a free education all the way up and through, so that we can be competitive in the world with technology and all this. But we got to fix our K through 12 first.
Yeah, and I also, and getting back to the poor neighborhoods and the drug infested, the inner cities. They took away the sports. So the kids, not even after school activities, just bring sports back so the kids have something to do after school. You can't afford, you can't take everything away from them, because if a child has an opportunity to play a sport, male or female, pretty much chances they're going to stay on a bit of a straight and narrow, because they're going to have a coach. They're going to have something to do. They're going to have something to look forward to. They're going to have an opportunity. But they stripped all that, like you said, defunded the schools and taking it all away from them. But not giving them anything back.
So I didn't know they stripped the sports programs. Now, is that just in certain schools that are funded less? Because where I live here in Florida, there's still sports happening.
Yeah, down south there seems to be sports is everywhere. Up here, nothing.
There's not even a basic, and I apologize for my technical difficulty just now. There is not even a basic after school program where, the kids can just congregate in the cafeteria until maybe 4:30, 5 o'clock with the supervision of a teacher, so that parents who are rushing from work don't have to, go nuts. There's not even basics. And the program that existed during COVID, where there were free lunches for everybody across the board, has now been extinguished. So you are back to paying for school lunch. You can apply for free or reduced cost meals, but we're moving out of this pandemic full steam ahead, and we really didn't fix any of the problems that we saw during the entirety of the last 2 years that really needed. We're just putting our finger in the hole, and the whole dam is going to explode sooner or later across the board.
Yeah. because now they're saying that we spent so much money during COVID that they don't have the money to put back into anything. So it's ridiculous. And it's not fair that kids go to school hungry or anything like that. Like my kids never, we had to pay, you know, because the cutoff to get a free lunch is like, forget about it, you know, but yet everybody struggles, you know? So it's like, if you're in school, you need your brain, because you know, I'm nutrition too. You need to have the inside covered. You know, your brain needs a certain amount of fat, carbohydrates, protein. Like you need that to be able to learn. Mm-hmm. So like the basic necessity, you're not even giving them.
And as you can see, we could talk your ears off all day about myriad.
Oh yeah, I mean
every topic.
Yeah, these topics are so sad because I just want my listeners, you know, really to stop and really think about what we're talking about, because you hear about this all the time and you're like, yes, this is a problem, but you got to think that as we're talking, there's a bunch of kids all over the country who are hungry, who can't focus on what they're learning because they haven't eaten. And then they're scared when they get out of school because they don't know what kind of violence they're going to encounter or what their state of mind their parents are going to be in. Like there's all these things are happening. And can you imagine being a little kid and going through this? And I mean, I know somewhat like I have, like when you go home and you're, oh, dad's been drinking. Let me just try to avoid him best I can. And if sometimes you can't, I'm in trouble. I don't know what I did. That feeling is horrible. And I remember going to a friend's house. I thought I had it bad. I went to his house and it was like, his dad was a crazy maniac inside, breaking stuff. And I was like, and when I saw that, I was like, so there's a different level for every, you know, but everybody internalizes it differently. But these things, the only thing we can do to help as a society is with schools. I think schools, after school programs, guidance counselors, try to make sure these kids are getting the help. If they are in a bad home, we help fix it. But we don't have funds for any of this stuff. And in a country with as much money as our country has, where we have as many billionaires as we have, we spend billions of dollars on prisons that are making these problems worse. We can figure out where to find the money. We're just not interested in it, is what it seems like.
Yeah,
100%.
and because you know what it is, and unfortunately, people don't want to look at it because then they have to recognize that things are bad. And we've had this discussion, Chelsea, a thousand times, where it's just some people just don't want to deal with it. And I always, when somebody says, "Well, what am I going to do?" and I'm like, but if everybody says that, no, nothing's going to change. But if everybody starts doing something, that 1 leads into 2, leads into 20, leads into 60, and change happens. You know, so until people realize, yeah, this is the stuff that's bad or not good. And maybe if I do start saying something, or I still start, you know, rustling feathers at the schools, maybe somebody else will join me, like, you know, and it starts happening. But people just, sometimes they're just like, no, I'm not, like, I don't want to actually think that stuff is happening, or it's not in my family, so I don't really care. But that's not the way to be, you know? Yeah.
We have to start looking at ourselves as brothers and sisters all across the board and across the country. And right now we're so divided that it's anybody that thinks differently means my enemy. We can disagree on things. We should not be enemies, though. You know, that's we have to look at this country has. And people, I mean, right now there's so many other problems, though, right? I mean, we're not going to get into them, but like gun control. And when you bring that up, it's a tough one too, because it's hard. Like that one's a hard one for me to completely understand. I'm anti-prohibition, but should we prohibit guns? Then only the bad, you know, our country's so gun heavy. It's like, I don't know how you deal with that. But when you mention it, people get furious on either side and say, well, we got to talk about it. We can't not talk about it. People are being shot. I don't know what the answer is, but we should be talking about it productively. And that goes with all other problems. We need to be having a discussion, and it needs to be a friendly discussion, because we're not going to get anywhere by yelling at each other. And that seems to be all we do is yell, and neither side can agree. Whoever's got more seats in the Senate or the House is going to pass legislation that's going to piss off the other side. They're going to try to reverse it. It's just such a mess. Everything.
Yeah.
100%.
Listen, I mean, my husband and I, we just celebrated 13 years married, and we've been together for almost 20 years. And we rarely agree on politics and current events, but we just never stop talking. And, you know, this is how we maintain the foundation of our relationship. So if two married people who have literally lived in a house with each other for almost 20 years can work it out and have a happy relationship, it's possible for sure. You just never stop talking. And believe me, my husband never stops talking.
You know, I find it like, you know, my views on this, Chelsea. I definitely have certain views, but I am always open to hear others because
Yeah,
I might
of
learn
course.
something.
That's the
And
way to
people
be.
will say, well, I don't want to debate with her or this, or people like, I'm not going to, like, straight, like people that I know, I'm not going to get. No, I want to, because I'm number one, not mean. Number two, want to listen. And you might teach me something, or you might show me something. My husband was so firm in his views. And we used to have the most drag out fights. And I would be like, but you're not listening, because you might hear something from somebody or me, but never the wife. You might hear something that just be like, you know what? I've been looking at this so different my whole entire life, but I learned that from that person.
Yeah.
You have to be open to it, and like you said, there's no reason to be a division, because it's so like that now. People will not even talk to you if they know that you're for this or for that. And it's like, are you kidding me? Like, what is the benefit of that?
And this is
There's
the
just
problem.
so much more than that.
Exactly. And this is the problem I have with Republicans and Democrats is once you've put yourself a label on your beliefs, then you believe everything they believe. So if you go into an argument about whether it's drugs, gun control, whatever the argument is, if you're a Democrat, you already have your opinions. You're not open to new opinions because I'm a Democrat. This is where we stand.
Yeah.
Well, how about we stand somewhere where we can reasonably talk? Because that's not ever going to work. And it is true. I'm like, let's look at the data. That's why I would say, look at the data and look at what other countries have done to fix problems that we haven't fixed and see how we compare to those countries and talk about it and see what we're willing to do as a country, as a nation with whatever the problem is and how we can get there. We see where we want to go. How do we start getting there instead of just going in and being like, nope, we're just going to do this the whole time. And then nothing happens. And that's
it's pretty sad when you see other countries looking at America and saying, wow, we need to raise money for them. We need to, help them. We need to do things for them because like, we're like the new third world country. Because of the way our politics and the division, like a friend of mine who lives in Canada, a really close friend, sent me this thing that Germany's fundraising for us for food insensitivities because we don't have enough food to give to people.
And that's sad because we have the money. That's what's sad. We're just not spending it on them.
And one of my biggest papers in school was on food insecurities. And it's out there, man. It's out there. People are suffering. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy. But I don't know.
I hate to wrap this up right now because I'm really enjoying the conversation. And I feel like we have more to talk about, but I have to get ready for work. I'm going to go play a show. And then tomorrow morning at 5:30 in the morning, we're flying out to Asheville. I'm excited about North Carolina, but not about the 5:30 flight.
Nice. Enjoy.
Have a good gig. Be safe out there and have fun.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for doing this podcast. For sure. We'll do it again sometime.
Okay.
Yes. Thanks, Aaron.
All right. Peace out.
Bye.
Bye.
All right. Peace, Nicks. As always, if you like what we're doing on the Peace on Drugs podcast, go to Apple Podcasts and give us a 5-star rating. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter at the Peace on Drugs podcast. And go to www.thepeaceondrugs.com/subscribe and subscribe to our newsletter. And as always, we're going to let Twiggy Branches take us on out.
You pay for what you get. You pay for what you get. You pay for what you get when you align yourself with the appropriate jet set. Bad head, bad high, boots hard, pocket in mind. No one sending love east. Cocaine and smile, and watching the sunrise, watching it all, the Sunset Boulevard. Are you my doctor? Are you my dealer? Are you my You pay for what you get. You pay for what you get. You pay for what you get when you align yourself with the appropriate jet set. Bad head, bad high, boots hard, pocket in mind. So they're sending in a breeze, and by the grace of God, I see the sunrise. I see the sun get. You pay for what you get. You pay for what you get. You pay for what you get. Are you my doctor? Are you my dealer? Are you my doctor? Are you my dealer? Are you my doctor? Are you my dealer?